Oftentimes, tech innovators get ideas that can quickly exceed their expectations and their budgets, which results in creation that nobody wants or really needs. Usually, these innovations are hidden from the public due to the fact that the creators are embarrassed by their uselessness. But today, we're going to be sharing these inventions with you and let you decide for yourself if these are works of art or terribly thought out ideas. Let's get started and jump right into today's video. Hawaii Interstate H3. Hawaii was convinced that creating an interstate highway on their island would decrease traffic from tourists and natives alike by tenfold, but the opposite seemed to occur. In the 1960s, the Highway H3 was proposed decades after the Pearl Harbor terrorist attack. The idea was that naval units stationed in Hawaii would be able to easily get from point A to point B in case of another emergency. However, the need for such an easy getaway soon became irrelevant as the years went on. The war was over, and Hawaii was no longer a target for nefarious activity. So why have this huge stretch of road? Natives are wondering the same thing. Often called the Road to Nowhere, Hawaii Interstate H3 runs across the island, but so does several other highways, ones that don't cost $1.3 billion. Many feel that the installation of this highway was a major waste of taxpayers' money, and that it's proven itself to be completely useless for anyone living on the island. In fact, this highway is so hated that many natives believe it's haunted and refuse to drive on it for superstitious reasons. Talk about a huge waste of money. If a major percentage of your population won't even use the road, how could you say it's a good investment? Yucca Mountain. Nuclear war is no laughing matter, and it's obvious that countries need to be prepared just in case the worst happens. That being said, some American politicians are speaking out against the nuclear waste zone, Yucca Mountain, that is currently located in Nevada. The Biden administration, the country's current Democratic president, has spoken out against Yucca Mountain, claiming that nuclear waste pileup could have potentially dangerous effects. It's no secret that nuclear waste isn't the best for the environment, so surely keeping a mass storage unit for projects of this nature could very well harm the plants, animals, and even human beings in the surrounding area. Even nuclear specialists are speaking up against this storage unit, concerned of the potential aftermath the citizens of Nevada could face if nuclear waste is continued to be stored there. Democratic representatives of Nevada, Dina Titus, has been quoted saying, "That's what worries me. Until you get a policy in place, it will always be something you have to watch." No matter what side of the political spectrum you fall on, I think we can all agree that nuclear waste is something we need to take seriously. Hopefully in the future, politicians can muster up a policy that not only properly disposes of said waste, but also keeps the surrounding citizens safe from its potential effects. CIUDAD Real Central Airport. Spain is a hotspot for travelers across the world, be they from North America, Asia, Africa, or even Europe. Everyone longs to visit and take in the culture of this famous country. So building an airport outside of Madrid, which isn't insanely congested with people, would be genius, right? Wrong. The CIUDAD Real Central Airport was designed to allow even more tourists into Spain without having to deal with the long lines and wait times at the Madrid airport. Developers felt this idea would be so lucrative that they poured $1.3 billion into it. That's an insane amount of money to spend on an airport, and it proved to unfortunately not pay off. So much so that the project was actually halted mid-production, which only happens if there are major financial shortcomings during the construction phase. The first issue was the location. Madrid is Spain's hotspot, so building an airport over 200 kilometers from Madrid wasn't exactly the smartest decision. There was also an inability to get major airlines to fly into the airport, which caused a lack of interest from passengers, as the only planes they could take into CIUDAD Real Central Airport were small private planes. In the end, this airport was better to be kept in the drafts and not made reality. And the developers behind it took a major financial loss and even declared bankruptcy because of the project. All in all, not a good decision, and I'm sure they learned their lesson for the next business venture they go on. NAYPYIDAW, capital of Myanmar. Just think, you go to bed one night and in the morning you wake up to see that your country has a brand new capital, built overnight. It's pretty insane, right? Well, the citizens of Myanmar don't have to imagine, since this was their reality. In 2005, Myanmar officials announced to the public that the country would have a new capital, NAYPYIDAW, which means the king's residence. Many speculated the reason for this move, from potential military defense to astrology. The reasons varied greatly, and although we may not know the official truth, one thing can be for sure. This was a total waste of money. This new capital was built with tourism in mind, with hotels, attractions, and even golf courses, all to appease the country's visitors. However, one major oversight wasn't taken into consideration: population. NAYPYIDAW had a considerably less number of citizens as the former capital, Islamabad. Why does this matter for the budding mecca of tourism? Well, think about it. Why would people not want to live there? The facts are pretty straightforward. NAYPYIDAW had poor healthcare facilities, schools, and even job markets that made it something of a ghost town for the country. In fact, the 20-lane highway that stretched across the newfound capital is often empty with barely any cars to be seen. Even the city's airport is barely used, as only about a dozen people use it on a busy day. That's 12 people. Needless to say, building a tourist hotspot in an area where a lot of people in your own country won't even visit, let alone those from other areas of the world, is not the best idea. Perhaps Myanmar should have stuck with their old capital instead of going all out in this totally useless megaproject. St. Francis Dam, USA. A lot of these megaprojects have caused nothing more than some financial loss for their developers. But what if we told you that there was one that cost the ultimate price: people's lives? In San Francisco County in Southern California, William Mulholland set out to build the St. Francis Dam. The canyon it was built on was not only unstable for such a project, but also ran for 40 miles, which is a pretty stretch of land. The dam was built in 1926, and at the time, the engineering methods used to complete the project were not the best, to say the least. This proved to be fatal in 1928 when the dam collapsed, causing a massive flood of water that would go on to take the lives of hundreds of innocent civilians. And to top this disaster off, William Mulholland, the designer of the faulty dam, was found innocent of all charges. Although his engineering career soon came to a screeching halt, he never faced any legal repercussions for causing so many deaths. It just goes to show that sometimes ill-fated projects not only affect those who have invested money, but people who had no input on the creation at all. Truly a devastating example of what can happen when you don't put the proper care and attention needed into a mega project. Superconducting SUPERCOLLIDER. With all those supers in the name, one would think this project would be a smashing success. Well, you would be terribly mistaken. In the late 1980s, the United States set out to compete with Switzerland over who could make the largest particle accelerator complex. Switzerland was working on the Large Hadron Collider, which they would go on to complete in 2008. The US saw this as a challenge and put over $2 billion of taxpayers' money into the project, which would soon fall apart completely. Congress decided that the project was grossly mismanaged and far too expensive, costing more money than it would eventually be worth. In the end, they decided to stop the superconducting SUPERCOLLIDER completely, letting Switzerland have the win on particle accelerator technology. How would you feel if your taxpayer dollars went to a project like this? Would you be excited at the potential for a scientific feat, or would you rather it go towards something else? Forest City. Imagine living on a tropical island that's equipped with smart technology everywhere you turn. Pretty sweet, right? Well, the general public doesn't think so. Forest City was a plan to create 4 man-made islands that were the pinnacle of tech and easy living, but they failed to see one thing coming: the COVID-19 pandemic. Coronavirus meant certain death for a lot of industries, but Forest City in particular took a heavy hit. When the pandemic hit, many countries were forced to close their borders and the tourism industry faced major financial losses. And that could only mean disaster for the development of the tourism-based city. Built off the tip of Johor, Forest City was supposed to allow visitors to easily come into Singapore and enjoy this new man-made land, but they're seeing a lack of interest as people don't want to travel or take vacations due to the risk of getting infected with COVID-19. Would you travel across the globe for something like this? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your take on Forest City and whether or not it may have a chance of ever getting built. The Big Dig, USA. Highways seem to be a major source of trouble for the United States, as this is the second highway project for them that has completely failed. The US wants to build a highway that would go through the center of Boston, Massachusetts, that would consist of tunnels and bridges. Well, we all know tunnels and bridges aren't easy construction projects to undertake, But do you think 15 years to build a highway that only goes 3.5 miles is reasonable? Many of those who live in Boston don't. In fact, this highway has cost American citizens much more than a headache, but a whopping $22 billion in taxpayer money. That's just absolutely insane. So you may be wondering, if this stretch of road costs that much, why is it taking so long to complete? Well, the answer isn't as black and white as you may think. There have been several theories as to why this highway has yet to be completed. They range from accusations of negligence and shoddy workmanship, to even flaws in the initial design. As you can imagine, this highway project has been more of an inconvenience than a helpful way to get across town. I'm sure those living in Boston are wishing a mega project like this was never started in the first place. HALLANDSAS Rail Tunnel, Sweden. If you think the United States are the only ones with road troubles, then do we have news for you. The HALLANDSAS Rail Tunnel in Sweden was an underground tunnel that began construction in 1992 and was set for completion by 1995. However, it would be 20 years after their goal date until the project was completely finished. What caused such a delay? Well, during the construction phase of the project, water began to seep into the tunnel, obviously posing a massive safety threat to not only the workers, but anyone who would go on to use it in their day-to-day. There was also a massive tech failure as a drill broke down after drilling about 59 feet into the ground, which isn't all that much when creating a tunnel of this size. As soon as things seemed to get back on track, the main contractor decided to leave the project, abandoning his workers and leaving them without any guidance, causing further delay. When the project was taken over by construction titan Skanska, even more problems began to occur. Skanska used a sealant for the tunnel that would eventually poison the fish and pollute the waters. And to make matters worse, even the cattle by the construction site began to fall ill. Obviously, this had to be fixed, so the project was delayed even more, much to the annoyance of all involved. In 2015, 23 years after the initial start of the project, it was finally completed. But it cost $1.3 billion in total, which was way more than one ever thought possible. Let's just hope the people of Sweden are making good use of the HALLANDSAS tunnel, as it cost them so much money to be built in the first place. James Webb Space Telescope. Have you ever wanted to peer into the night sky and check out all it has to offer? Well, you're not alone. So much so that NASA invested over $1 billion into the James Webb Space Telescope, a high-powered telescope that would rival the famous Hubble. But the initial billion-dollar investment would soon inflate to over $9.7 billion as the project would drag on for years. The initial debut of 2007 would soon become a fantasy as NASA faced several issues during the telescope's creation. From mathematical errors to using the wrong cleaning solvent, the James Webb Telescope would face dilemma after dilemma. In fact, they faced so many setbacks that the telescope wasn't launched until December of 2021. That's 14 years after the proposed launch date of 2007. It just goes to show that even geniuses at NASA can have oversight when it comes to mega projects and end up biting off more than they can chew. NHS National Programme for IT, United Kingdom. In 2002, the United Kingdom set out to revolutionize the healthcare system. They would do this by creating a system that would log patients' information all onto one single program, making it easier for healthcare providers to access patient records when tending to their needs. This project would link over 30,000 doctors and 300 hospitals together, which is a pretty ambitious feat. So, what went wrong? Well, due to poor project management and a variety of technical issues during its creation, the NHS program would go on to cost $14.7 billion, which would cause the British government to eventually call it quits on the project. In the end, the public was out $12.2 billion in taxpayer money, which I'm sure they weren't happy about. It's crazy to think that a project that was slated for completion by 2005 would be a disaster and not ready to use by the year 2011. If the UK had completed the NHS program, there's no doubt it would have made the lives of doctors and patients alike much easier. American Dream Meadowlands Mall, USA. Attractions, fine dining, and enough stores to blow your entire paycheck. What more could you ask for in a mall? The creators behind the American Dream Meadowlands Mall thought the same thing when they sought out this venture. They wanted to create a mall that would rival some of the country's greatest shopping complexes, like Mall of America. However, when their top investor went bankrupt in 2007, just 2 years after construction had started, they would soon be faced with a plethora of problems. They faced legal problems, construction errors, and even had the roof of the mall cave in at one point, which I'm sure would not leave shoppers satisfied. This behemoth of a building, located in New Jersey, was initially thought to only cost $1.2 billion, but ended up costing investors over $5 billion. That's quite the difference. Eventually, after years and years of delays, the mall opened its doors in October of 2020. That's 15 years after it began construction. That's a super long wait time just so you can buy some clothes and eat in an overpriced food court. One might be able to say that this American dream of a mall would soon become a nightmare for those involved. San Francisco Shipyard, USA. San Francisco is an amazing city, full of culture, sights, and enough sourdough bread to keep you full for days. So it only makes sense to develop it as much as possible. That's how the San Francisco Shipyard plan was formed. The idea was to take a desolate shipyard located in the city and renovate it. The shipyard would be filled with condos, restaurants, and enough attractions to keep tourists and locals staying and paying for more. This was the city's largest redevelopment project since it faced a catastrophic earthquake in 1906, over a century ago. Things were going smoothly, and this new hub of entertainment was set to be unveiled in 2024. But like all things on this list, ideas didn't go as planned. The project's expected cost rose quickly due to its ambitious nature, and would actually cost $14.6 billion. That's a lot of money, even for someone as rich as Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. This, along with some of the usual construction delays, pushed the unveiling back to 2030, until the project was abandoned completely. San Francisco Shipyard may not be the latest hotspot in town, but no worries. This great city still has plenty to offer. And there you have it, mega projects that all faced abandonment. What do you think? Let us know down in the comments, and thanks for watching.